Hello, it's Notcast 240, 16th of October 2022. As you can tell from the title, today I'm going to be talking about Guns N' Roses and their debut album released in 1987. It is Appetite for Destruction and the 2018 Super Mega Duper Box Set, although this isn't the most super duper box set of the versions that there are. Also, if you've been watching these right from the beginning, I came past my second anniversary, so I've been doing this for 2 years now, which is pretty surprising. When I started off doing them, I wasn't sure if we'd ever get to having society open again. I mean, obviously, COVID hasn't gone away. We're in a post-COVID world now, and everything is a little different. It's the same, but it's different at the same time. And one of the things from going back into the world after COVID is I've kind of learned I don't need to go to every gig that I used to go to. So before the plague, I used to go to maybe 100 a year, and I'm cut down substantially. Although I did see public service broadcasting last night in Margate at Dreamland, a new venue for me. Fantastic venue, actually. Really reminds me of Barrowlands in Glasgow. If you get a chance to go, it's worth going. I'm now going to call it Barrowlands by the Sea. They may not agree with me. I don't really know. Also, for the more astute of you that will have noticed, I am wearing a GNR t-shirt with the GNR logo from 2002. This is was some heavily discounted overstock that was unsold on the band's aborted 2002 tour, where they got about halfway through and they went, fuck it, we're giving up. So there we are. So this is the first of the Guns N' Roses ones. I will be talking about their whole 5 albums across a number of episodes, and of course making derisory references to overpriced and incomplete box sets as we go along. Guns was, alongside Metallica and Maiden in 1987, for me one of the bands that was a formative part of my musical education. I think, like a lot of people in 1987 who liked Guns N' Roses, I was a bit gawky, a bit spotty. I had a full head of hair. I know that some of you won't believe that. I didn't feel in any way equipped to operate in the society in which I operated in. I felt like I was an undercover agent doing a reasonable impersonation of a teenage boy and hoping to God that I wasn't going to be found out behind enemy lines. It was at that point, you obviously didn't have any agency, didn't have money, didn't have anything that would fulfill Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are few places in the world quite as alienated from the society in which you're forced to live as perhaps being 14 or 15. I think now it might be a little bit more inclusive, might be a little bit easier to find people, might be a little less lonely. But certainly at the time when I was experiencing it, my experiences of it were very much that there was an established kind of narrative and discussion in culture, and I wasn't part of it. And because I didn't have any money, and because I didn't have, a car or a mortgage or a wife or anything like that, or they weren't interested in selling to me. Adverts weren't interested in talking to me. Culture wasn't interested in talking to me because I was a broke kid. And in that, you then found music that perhaps reflected the sense of rejection that you felt from the society around you, and the sense of annoyance, and make no mistake about it, Appetite for Destruction, Guns' debut album, here presented in its rather shocking original sleeve, was a furious polemic at the state of society in 1986, and very clearly pinned its colour to the mast as a rejection of the world which was presented to us. Guns' history starts, I think, a little bit differently. Starts in around about 1984, or actually May the 25th, 1983, which is almost 40 years ago, when Axl joined a band called, I think, Rapid Fire, and they recorded a demo tape that had 5 songs on it. It did later get a very, very limited CDR release, and I think you can now download it on Bandcamp. But his first recordings, which have been issued, are 5 songs on a demo tape. The songs are Ready to Rumble, All Night Long, Prowler, On the Run, and Closure. I don't know if they're any good. I listened to them a couple of weeks ago. I I remember absolutely nothing about them now, so I don't know. I just don't really. But clearly, if they were good, as you will find out from the next record that I'm going to talk about, Axl Rose never forgot a good song, and he didn't write that many of them because he just didn't write many songs full stop. The whole Guns N' Roses catalogue of officially released material comes to something like 60 songs, I think, which over 40 years is a pretty slim harvest. Makes Kraftwerk look lazy though, but there you are. The first release, which, if you're a Guns N' Roses nutter and you have to own absolutely everything that the band do, or is associated with the band that's officially been released, the first release you need to get is this CD, Hollywood Rose, The Roots of Guns N' Roses, featuring Axl and Izzy and a couple of other people, right, with a 5-song demo tape of material that comes from before Guns existed. This was recorded around about, I don't know, mid 1984, I think, and it features 5 songs, a couple of which you will recognise. It features Anything Goes and Shadow of Your Love and Reckless Life, as well as 2 extra songs, Killing Time, not the same song that Metallica covered around about the same time, and a song called Rocker, which is perhaps as inspired as its title. It's neither AC/DC nor Thin Lizzy songs of the same name. It's just a song called Rocker! And you can now pick up this CD for about £2 plus postage on Amazon. I think that's how much I paid for it very recently. It's a 5-song demo tape from 1984 that's been remastered. I made sound slightly less awful, and then it's been remixed by Gilby Clarke, and remixed by Fred Corey, both of whom have a tangential relationship to GNR. Gilby was the band's live touring guitarist between 1991 and 1994, and Fred Corey played drums for them briefly on a tour in 1988 when Steve Popcorn Adler broke his wrist, stroke arm, stroke ability to play drums. Is Hollywood Rose, The Roots of Guns N' Roses, any good? The definitive answer to that is no. I can see why Axl sued to try and get it not to be released. I can also see why he failed, because he didn't own the copyright in it. It's like those terrible compilations that are like the Many Moods of Joy Division. Really? I thought all Joy Division songs were really just bloody miserable. It's like one of those kind of releases. Best to pick up cheap and long after its initial release. It's exploitative, I think it's fair to say, but it has a legal right to exist. Fred Corey, by the way, was the drummer in Great White, a band that was managed by Alan Niven. Alan Niven, who later became Guns' manager, and that became a point of contention, I think, later on. The GNR lineup kind of coalesced from the ashes of Hollywood Rose, and that featured Axl, Izzy, Tracy Guns. Duff joined on the 21st of March 1985. Slash joined on the 1st of June 1985. Steven Adler was probably the last one to come into the process. I must admit, if you're looking for a fully researched and referenced academic essay about the history of Guns N' Roses, this is not it. So if you're going to put a comment down there, go, oh no, but you got a fact wrong. It's like those guys that say, no, you can't possibly have a MiG-53 in that particular year because the MiG-53 was only a prototype. And if you look at the propellers on the MiG-53, it pulls me out of the film completely because those propellers were only used on a MiG-52. And it's like, dude, get a fucking life, okay? I have done my research, but I've also got a life. I did, by the way, read this book, Reckless Road, Guns N' Roses. Yet another one of the many coffee table books, or things which kind of like came in the slipstream of the band's success. Although I think this was published around about 2017. Again, this is a charity shop job. Features basically lots and lots of photographs of the band in their very early days and highlights of how they did or didn't play gigs. Even then, Axl didn't turn up to absolutely everything. So Guns kind of formed officially, I think, 1st of June around about 1985. And at that point, they had Jumping Jack Flash, Think About You, Don't Cry, and Move to the City. And then the next thing that they did is that in terms of studio work, they went into the studio to Mystic Studios and they recorded a 5-song demo tape. The 5-song demo tape has been officially released, but only inside the absurdly expensive locked and loaded edition of Appetite for Destruction, which I don't have, because the locked and loaded edition of it is the 2018 box set version, which has something like 13 LPs, 12 7-inch singles, 4 CDs, a Blu-ray, a USB stick, possibly a small helicopter, and cost about £1,000. It was ridiculous, absurd, and clueless in both its pricing and its sales. Whoever was the band's management clearly thinking that in 2018 Guns N' Roses fans would be the kind of people that would happily plonk down £1,000 for a box set. This is the more affordable four disc plus Blu-ray version, which this retailed for £150, which is absurd. And was later downgraded. I paid £49 for it, and of course, because I ordered it from Amazon, free postage. So there you have it, which is much more like the price that you should pay for it. So, but the Mystic Studio demo tape has been officially released, but only once, and it's hidden inside the locked and loaded box set, which means you have to break open the packaging of the box set to get to the cassette that's waggling around inside. Pretty bonkers, I know, but there you have it. For me, though, the first time I really became aware of Guns N' Roses was probably mid to late 1987. There was a gang of about 4 or 5 of us at school, obviously my brother as well, who was I was a teenage metalhead, and between us we bought like one copy of Kerrang and we shared it amongst ourselves. Of course, every band then, you would read and go, this could be an amazing band, but you wouldn't know if it was an amazing band unless you'd actually paid to own the record or the tape or the CD or whatever edition of it that it was, or the band were played on the radio. And Guns hadn't done radio sessions in the UK, they hadn't done live concerts, so I couldn't hear them on the Friday Rocks, so I could hear songs that were played on Friday nights. But at that point, we were asking people to tape the Friday Rock show, and we were going out on Friday nights, hopefully to meet girls and beer. Which neither of which we were particularly successful with, being 14, 15, 16, and pretending like in Hot Fuzz, where the guy goes, "What year were you? What's your birthday?" And he's like, "I don't even know the date." And he goes, "What year?" And he goes, "Every year." And that's kind of like what we felt we were like, is that we were just hoping nobody would ever ask and go, "You're not old enough to drink in here, are you?" And we just kind of brazen it out, thinking, well, if we've got long hair and black t-shirts, we must be over the age of 18, so we must be okay to buy cider and to dance to music and go to clubs. Never got caught. It turned out absolutely fine, obviously, afterwards. So the first thing that most people heard from the album was some of the early singles, and there was the first single that was released from the album was "It's So Easy," and I should say I don't have "It's So Easy." I don't have it because I did have it at one point and I didn't have it anymore. And the single for "It's So Easy," which I think is backed with Mr. Brownstone, features an exclusive vinyl-only track. It's an Alan Niven mix of Mr. Brownstone, as kind of like an alternative version of the LP track of Mr. Brownstone. It's never been released on CD. Why it isn't on the Superduper Box Set version, no idea. Or any version, actually. But it's the one GNR single, aside from Night Train and November Rain, that I don't have in any form. I should point out, when I was younger, I would buy singles because of the B-sides. I had a very limited budget. So, being a kid of pocket money and limited budget, I was more interested in the music than in the formatting. Of course, if I'd have bought picture disc versions of the singles and fake leather patch versions and 10-inch versions and all that stuff, they're really expensive now on Discogs. And this was one of the things that Alan Niven was really, really keen on, was tapping into the hardcore, insatiable side of being a metal fan, and metal bands were very good at exploiting this. They were good at putting bullet-shaped picture discs and God knows what else, because they knew that metal fans, they didn't just like metal, they loved it, they breathed it. They were like Wolverine. It went through their body like a bone, and they needed to have everything. So it didn't matter that, say, your first single release of "Sweet Child of Mine," backed with "Out to Get Me," by the way, had an LP track on the B-sides. What matters is it came in some kind of weird crucifix-shaped 7-inch, and you could buy it from Hob Days for about £1.99, and that would get it incrementally tiny further way up the charts, except me on £6 a week, pocket money a week, wouldn't buy it because I've got those 2 tracks on the LP that I've taped off, clearly down the road. I don't need to buy that 7-inch single. I need that money to own a copy of Kerrang or something which I haven't previously experienced, as opposed to repackaging things I've already done. And I should point out, by the way, that one of the reasons that I didn't buy any Guns N' Roses singles at the time was because all of the G-sides were on the bloody albums. I had the album anyway. I didn't need it on a 7-inch. I needed a new track. Well, of course, the band was sitting on huge amounts of extra material that they just weren't releasing. And were letting be released quietly on very expensive bootleg releases. So this is I think the first 7-inch of Sweet Child of Mine, which was released in, let me just quickly check, 1988. I think it came out twice. I don't quite remember, actually, because it was a very, very long time ago, and I am a bear of little brain. But they had, I think, Welcome to the Jungle was the first single of theirs which I owned. Here is the 12-inch version of Welcome to the Jungle. This is backed with an acoustic version of Night Train. And the acoustic version of Night Train, by the way, is different to the version that was on the Lies EP. Sorry, the acoustic version of You're Crazy, actually, because it's Welcome to the Jungle, backed with Night Train, and then You're Crazy on a 12-inch. And this came again in a number of different formats. There was a 7-inch, there was a 12-inch, there was a poster bag version of it, I think. There was probably a version of it that paid your phone bill for you. Guns were not afraid to exploit the fan base by putting old songs in new shiny packages. Welcome to the Jungle is the first track off the debut album, Appetite for Destruction. And I can't tell you, this album, I played the hell out of this album. This is my original vinyl copy from 1987. £6.99 from our price in Northfield I paid for it. And as was obligatory at the time, stickers. Contains lyrics which some people may find offensive, and also includes the singles Sweet Child of Mine and Welcome to the Jungle. So this was one of the earlier versions of the album, as you can tell by the sleeve that's on the front there. Now this sleeve has now been withdrawn. I think it's quite expensive to get a copy of this with that sleeve on, because it was available for a few months and then it kind of just disappeared out of the shops. And instead what you had was the different kind of, the 4 heads crucifix logo, which is now widely adopted as the cover for Appetite for Destruction. And then you had these live photos of the band performing somewhere, doing something, presumably getting drunk. Now this was in the late 80s, and this being an original vinyl edition came on quite thin vinyl, because they got used to making vinyl thinner during the OPEC oil crisis in the 70s, and vinyl still didn't get much thicker after that. And thin inner sleeves, as you can see by the fact that my LP kind of sneaks out the side there. This was done cheaply. There was no expectation that the album would sell enormous amounts. Guns were a band alongside bands like Great White and Warrant and Aerosmith and Black Sabbath. They were an upcoming rock band in a sea of rock bands. There was nothing that told you that G&R were any different from anybody else and were going to be any better than anybody else, apart from the fact that one of us heard one of the songs, bought the tape, and we all had the copy of the tape, and then we all had the song, and we all had the album, and we listened to it incessantly. And we wondered, well, why don't Guns play live? Of course, between, I think, summer 1987 and August the 31st, 1991, Guns played one UK show at Donington in the middle of the afternoon in 1988. Not perhaps the most well-managed of bands when it comes to touring at that point in time. So for us, Guns were this imaginary act that had no tangible presence. They only existed on records, and as soon as people were interested in it, they disappeared. Most bands would be like, hell yeah, we're going on the road, we're going to go and play arenas. And so if Guns N' Roses had been managed perhaps a little bit differently, you would have seen an arena run in 1989, which would have seen maybe 10-20 arena shows in Europe, arena shows in the UK, then an arena roundup in the US. But no, the band went to ground and disappeared completely. One of the first of many times that Guns N' Roses have not done the thing that people would expect them to do. Right from the off, they were not a band like other bands. And from the opening kind of guitar riffs of Welcome to the Jungle, where he goes, "Do you know where you are? You're in the jungle, baby. You're gonna die." Obviously, I haven't got the vocal talents of Axl. You could tell that this was a very, very different band from any others that I'd heard. Um, Welcome to the Jungle is the kind of song which, to me, I mean, immediately the first time I heard it, and I think it might have been the second Guns song I heard after Sweet Child of Mine, I was like, this is different. You know, I've been force fed anodyne, useless, castrated pop rock by Whitesnake and Motley Crue and Def Leppard and Skid Row and Poison and Aerosmith and Warrant and Vow Wow and all these other terrible bands that were basically writing songs about a world I never knew and couldn't know. And this was the first thing that sounded like it came from the same world that I knew. That lyric about, you know, just an urchin coming off of the streets, a hard case that's tough to beat. And you kind of go, that's the world that I knew. Now, you might have thought, well, suburban Birmingham wasn't that tough. It wasn't, but it wasn't that good. It wasn't that, well, we had fuck all money and we had a lot of ambition. We were constantly kind of living with our faces pressed up against the glass, with no money and with just a head full of dreams. Um, and bands like Def Leppard and stuff, and Women and White Snake and all that stuff, they were singing about abstract pop music concepts I had no experience of, like going out with supermodels and having swimming pools and cars and money and private jets, and listening to songs like Girls, 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 or Here I Go Again, Still of the Night, things like Every Rose Has Its Thorn, and just as a 14-year-old, it was just like, that's nothing to do with my life. I know nothing of that existence. I know nothing of what it's like to have, oh, the problem is too many women want to have sex with me and they're all strippers. And I hear, oh, by the way, here's a load of drugs and I've got $1 million. You know, as a 14-year-old, I'm like, that's not the world I lived in. It wasn't the world that was anywhere near the world I lived in. Heck, it probably wasn't even the world that Duran Duran lived in. And they were Birmingham's most millionaire pop group at the time. So, Appetite for Destruction was the album that I listened to, and I went, this band, there's a heck of a lot more in the songs and the lyrics than the world which I was experiencing through the world of rock and metal at the time. You know, you had something like It's So Easy, for example, which was obviously dripping in misogyny and misanthropy. Um, and at the same point, I kind of go, right, so that song's got 12 fucks in it. It's a lot of F words. But at the same point, I kind of was going, that's something which I could identify with parts of that, about, you know, ambition and power and all that stuff. Even a song like Night Train. Now, Night Train, you might have thought, oh, it's a song that glamorizes alcohol. But, you know, there's a line about taking your credit card down to the liquor store. And you kind of go, that's not glamorizing the song. It's not like you've got a song about, well, strippers and cars and stuff, and you know, fire women with a you know, a steel horse I ride and all that bollocks from Bon Jovi. It was something that was very different and very real and very tangible. Is we all knew people that drank a little bit too much and had no money. You know, that was the world we lived in. And we also perceived the world of Out to Get Me. So, I mean, lyrically, a lot of the songs on Appetite for Destruction are obsessed with things like power and proximity control and money and influence, and how people try to oppress you and control you and manipulate you through power and through money and through structures, organisational structures of society that you can't affect. Um, and that's one of the things that I through to this album, was it reflected to me the worldview that I had around the inherent inequality of reality, about the power and control that money has over people, the way in which authority structures, be they you know, teachers, bosses, policemen, HMRC, your bank account, whatever, tries to manipulate and control and oppress you into doing what it wants you to do so that you get a job. You know, and then you've got a song like Out to Get Me, which is exactly about all of that, is that it feels like people are trying to manipulate you, control you, lie to you, change your way of thinking, force you into doing things that perhaps you don't necessarily want to do. And there's almost a kind of like, certainly in the top of the song's lyric, there's a kind of like a heroic undercurrent of, I will do what I want to do, even though you are out to get me and you can't stop me. And it's a statement of defiance in the midst of trying to be manipulated and controlled by people outside of you. Which is a thing that Alex made very, very clear when he introduced Out to Get Me at that legendary show at the Ritz in 1988. We then have Mr. Brownstone, track 5, which, even though it's played about third in every gun show, this is the mix by, I think, Mike Klink, as opposed to the mix by Alan Niven. Now, I listened to the two back to back earlier on. I can barely tell the difference between the two. It feels like they're the same performance, just mixed ever so slightly different. So calling it an Alan Niven mix, a bit cheeky, really. It may have been mixed by Alan. I can't tell the difference between this and the other one, but clearly the band could. Maybe they gave Alan a chance to mix it to see what he was going to be like, and they preferred the other mixing on it. I don't know. So we have, a number of other things on here, and then we have Paradise City. Now, in the context of this, I think some people could have thought, oh, Paradise City is, that song around, girls and cars and weather and grass and drugs and all that type of stuff. But really, it was almost a kind of like a hymn to an impossible reality around take me down to the Paradise City where the grass is green and the girls are pretty. Please take me home. The idea of there's this promised land. And if you somehow kind of live your rock dreams, you can achieve that. Now, Paradise City was, I think, the 4th single released from the album. Here's the 7-inch, which I bought many, many years after the fact, by the way. This one came on originally in a ridiculous kind of crucifix-shaped picture disc, and maybe a leather satchel pack, and a 10-inch and a revolving sleeve and all that kind of stuff. And it's backed with a track called Used to Love Her LP version. Used to Love Her being from the Lies EP, which followed shortly. But Paradise City, again, I didn't buy at the time because I've got an LP track on the B-side. I haven't got a demo of, Back Off Bitch or Ain't Going Down or anything like that. Songs which were not released for years to come. Or even, one of the cover versions of Jumpin' Jack Flash or Heartbreak Hotel, or one of the studio versions of Nice Boys or Move to the City. No, it's the LP version of Used to Love Her, which is on the Lies EP, which came out before this came out, which means you bought the 12-inch and you got 3 songs you'd already heard. You just had it in a slightly different box, which was a triumph of packaging over content. But Paradise City was, I think, obviously one of the songs which people listened to and they were like, that's a very, very different kind of world, really. I mean, it's the story of a lot of people's lives, my life included, actually, in so much as you move to a town to try and make a change from the environment that you're in. Just think about where you're born. You're a victim of geography. You're a victim of I was born here. These are the career prospects which I have here. You can work in the car factory, the chocolate factory, the sauce factory. You can be unemployed. Those are your options. If you're in parts of Wales, for example, you work in the pot noodle factory on an 11-month contract, and that's it. That's your option. Or an Amazon warehouse or something. Paradise City, and to an extent, Welcome to the Jungle as well, is there somebody actually go, no, I reject that, and I'm going to go somewhere else, and I'm going to go and try and make my fortune in the city. Anybody that's had a shred of ambition has known that feeling, even if they've not been able to act upon it. Even if they've been, controlled by finance and circumstances and whatever else is going on in the forces that try to oppress and control them that are in Out to Get Me. So it's a song that identifies with lots of people, and also it's a banger. Air guitar, fantastic song to play air guitar to. In fact, they're all fantastic songs to play air guitar to. Even Anything Goes. Flip the album over. Side 2 is My Michelle. Now, My Michelle, you might think a lot of bands would write, here's a song about Mummy was a stripper or whatever, and she's in porno and now I'm in porno, woohoo, and that's my girlfriend. And that old cliche about, what do you call her? Hang on, a drummer's girlfriend is a stripper, that type of stuff. And My Michelle does not flinch around that. It tells the story of somebody whose daddy works in porno now that mum is not around. And she used to love the heroin and now she's underground. Now, obviously, I don't have the lived experience of that. But I have the lived experience of a dysfunctional family. Lots of people had experience of a dysfunctional family, and they didn't have necessarily the tools or the ability to control and approach them, those factors, when you were younger, because as a 14, 15-year-old, you aren't given those tools. The resources were not available unless you read some very expensive, very obscure books about psychology, or you sought help from certain people that work, at the NHS, which was not very well known at all. And so that was a difficult position to be in. Tracks 7, 8 actually is "Think About You," which is one of the few songs about love on the album, like straight, pure, unadorned love song. In fact, most of the songs on side 2, from "Think About You" onwards, there's 5 songs in a row that all deal with relationships. There's "Think About You," "Sweet Child of Mine," "You're Crazy," "Anything Goes," and "Rocket Queen." And "Think About You" has just this sense of, and kind of like also the lyric for "Sweet Child of Mine" as well, by the way, has this kind of sense of her hair reminds me of a warm place, same safe place where as a child I'd hide, and I'd pray for the thunder and the rain to quietly pass me by. So these are the 2 releases of "Sweet Child of Mine." Here's the 7-inch, which is back with "Out to Get Me." Here's the 12-inch, which was the later release, which is backed with "Move to the City," "A Whole Lot of Rosie," and "It's So Easy" live from the Marquee, which were also B-sides on the first "It's So Easy" 12-inch, I think. At least they were putting some non-album tracks on there. But these were songs which were where I think Guns were different and perhaps better than some of their contemporaries. Is they were a product of 5 very separate, very individual personalities. And I think you've got to talk about the 5 individuals in the band very, very briefly. Obviously you had Axel, who was both a walking bag of neuroses and complex kind of thoughts and feelings, with very, very strong, very headstrong opinions about things that could not be changed ever. It's kind of like a rock terminator, in so much as it cannot be reasoned with or bargained with ever, and it absolutely will not stop ever until it goes on stage late. Izzy there, who I think was perhaps the most dependable songwriter in the band, and that sounds a little bit controversial, because the band have only released 17 songs in the past 32 years after Izzy left, and those songs very definitely suffer from the presence or the absence of Izzy's very standard traditional kind of rock guitar thing. So Izzy is the closest thing to a Keith Richards, by the way, that Guns have. It's kind of like this very reliable, very dependable, very solid rock and roll guitarist who can write songs at the drop of a hat and can easily do it, but doesn't have to do it because he earned an awful lot of money out of this album. We have there on bass Duff McKagan, who, by the way, the first of the 3 autobiographies written by people is "It's So Easy" and "Other Lies." If you want to know what happens, this is an essential thing to read, written by one of the guys who was in the room, kind of like a punk hardcore influenced bass player, who I think really grounded the band. And then you had Slash, of course, on guitar, chap with a hat, again, second autobiography written by people that were in the room there, all of which are telling their story from their particular point of view. Slash is a fantastic guitar player, by the way, but you know that, otherwise you wouldn't have got 34 minutes into this video hearing me talk about Guns N' Roses. But Slash's role was almost, I don't think necessarily is particularly strong as a songwriter. I think he's great at texture, great at adding sounds over the top of a song, which when perhaps you've got Izzy not in the band anymore, and Izzy being maybe the guy that comes up with the riffs, Slash's power is to write incredible solos, not so strong at songwriting. I think it's fair to say. But you put all of these skills together alongside Steve Adler on drums, and there's a tiny section of the Venn diagram where everything converges. So, by the way, I would say at this point, Steve Adler, fantastic drummer, Very good, very complex. You listen to just his drum parts on his own, things like Mr. Brownstone or Rocket Queen, for example, or My Michelle. Is you listen to them, it's not just like an ABC part. He has multiple parts in that. Sometimes he's playing in conjunction with the bass, sometimes he's playing in conjunction with the solo. Sometimes the pattern and the attack and the percussion that he's adding matches up with the vocals, and he manages to do follow those key parts as opposed to going, well, I'm just going to play with the bass player, in a way that accentuates and emphasizes the strength of each of the individual songwriting parts. So if there's a solo, he's playing to accompany the solo. He's not playing to accompany the bass line. If there's a verse, he's playing against the vocal verse. He's not playing against the bass line. So, a great drummer, but didn't stay a great drummer for long. But when he was on form, absolutely excellent. Possibly hasn't got the stamina or the chops these days to play the songs perhaps the way that he used to. That's a different opinion. And since my drumming has taken a dramatic dip over the past 20 years, I'm on thin ground when he goes into any more detail about that. Then we have Sweet Child of Mine, a kind of song that you could have heard from the Eagles in the 70s. First time I heard Sweet Child of Mine, I was like, oh God, that's a classic rock song, in the way that Layla or Strawberry Fields Forever or I don't know, Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. It's like one of those songs that the first time you listen to it, you go, I'm going to be hearing that song for the rest of my life. It's going to come out in car radios for the rest of my life. And you just know as soon as you hear it, that is a song that you are going to be hearing in 40, 50 years' time, assuming you're still on the earth in 40 to 50 years' time. An incredible song. And it's the kind of song that you could have. Elton John would have done it in the 70s. ABBA could have done it, for example. It just happened to be, it was done by this incredibly bizarre, weird rock group, Guns N' Roses. And so there you go. Now we get in. There's 3 songs left to go. There's You're Crazy, which comes in 2 forms. One, there's that breakneck, pin you to the wall kind of version, which is on the LP. Which, put it technically, rocks like a bastard. And then there's the acoustic version off the 12-inch here of Welcome to the Jungle We Got Fun and Games, which is an acoustic version. This is a different acoustic version to the one that's on the Lies EP. Then you've got Anything Goes, the oldest song on the album. Anything Goes first made an appearance on the Hollywood Rose demo tape 3.5 years before release. It's got a really good lyric in, because I really identified with this, and I'm not sure I should say this, but the opening lyric is, I've been thinking about sex, always hungry for something that I haven't had yet. And as a 14-year-old, I definitely felt that lyric. And I was like, yeah, I've been thinking about something I haven't had yet quite a lot. It's a very, very strange song. And then there's that lyric about my way, your way, anything goes tonight. And you kind of go, oh, you dirty dog, around that. But it's not dirty in a kind of girls kind of way that you've got with Motley Crue or Whitesnake, where there's an inbuilt kind of juvenile ooh, look kind of approach, which you had. It was more kind of romantic, but at the same point dirty, as opposed to that kind of immature Beavis and Butthead approach, which is why those other bands I think are a pile of shit. Then finally we've got Rocket Queen, of course, which is a very specific statement around choosing to be with somebody as opposed to having to be with somebody. And it's actually, if you played it with an orchestra, you could imagine, apart from that naughty sex breakdown in the middle, a band like a band like ABBA could have done a song like Rocket Queen. Actually, you would have thought, oh, that would be a fantastic torch song about the power of relationships and the power of love. Maybe Frankie Goes to Hollywood could have done it instead, and you kind of go, wow. So all that stuff is wrapped up inside this album, and I love this album. I mean, it must have sold a bazillion copies in the past 35 years. It's hard to believe it's 35 years old, and it's hard to believe I've had this copy of the album for more than 2/3 of my life. But this very copy was the one that I listened to in early 1988, and it's the one that I listened to yesterday is the same thing, and it's one of the greatest rock albums of all time. So, as I said, the band released loads and loads of singles. They re-released "Sweet Child of Mine." Here's the second version that became a hit. That was Geth 55. Here's Paradise City, that was Geth 50. I think Welcome to the Jungle was Geth 47. So they were really trying it here. Then obviously they went to the next single, which came out from the next album. This is Patience. And this came from the follow-up release, which was kind of like an EP. So Guns' first release was the Live Like a Suicide EP, which was on a not really unofficial kind of self-made label. It was basically the band pretending to be on an indie so they could get some cred, went into the studio, recorded 4 songs, dubbed some crowd noise over the top of it, and called it a live EP when it wasn't live at all. And I think there were 10,000 copies, and they're all really expensive to get, and I don't particularly care too much for them. So they had Live Like a Suicide, which had 4 songs on it: Reckless Life, Nice Boys Don't Play Rock and Roll, Move to the City, and the cover of Aerosmith's Mannequin. I think Nice Boys was a song by an Australian band called Rose Tattoo, and I think their vocalist was Angry Andy Anderson, who sang a song called Suddenly, which was also in the charts at around about the same time because it was used in an episode of Neighbours in the UK, which is pretty surprising. I think he was also one of the first rock stars to have a shaved head and go bald long before Rob Halford and me did it, by the way. But Live Like a Suicide was double packed in an 8-track EP with the GNR Lies EP, which had Patience, Used to Love Her, You're Crazy, and an appalling song called One in a Million, which I haven't heard for a long time. And Patience was the next single that came out, trying to kind of plug the gap there with Patience as a single backed with Rocket Queen. I'm on the CD in the 12, which is an interview with Slash, which, considering the band had recorded the show at the London Marquee and the New York Ritz, was and could have put live tracks on the B-side, was spectacularly insulting, and that's why I didn't buy the singles. I think it's fair to say Lies was a stopgap release that bought the band some time as they went through it. And by the way, the bootleg industry went totally nuts at this point. There was lots and lots of bootleg releases. These are some of the more contemporary ones. This is recorded at the Tokyo 1988. This is the legendary show from the New York Ritz in 1988 as well, that was broadcast on British television with all the swearing taken out. Here's a bootleg DVD of it. And here's a multi-disc box set of live stuff, which was 10 quid off Amazon. What I should also add is that there was one other release during this period, effectively a Japanese Guns N' Roses Live from the Jungle EP, which was released as a CD and a 12-inch, and it featured some pretty difficult and hard to get tracks. It featured Shadow of Your Love, Move to the City, Knocking on Heaven's Door, Whole Lot of Rosie, It's So Easy, all live, or apparently live, alongside the Sweet Child of Mine track. This was only released in Japan. One of the things Alan Niven was keen on doing was doing special, unique and weird releases that you could only get in one particular country, thinking that Guns fans would go and buy them up, and then it would keep the record collectors happy. So yes, that's one of the ones that I had as well. Come 2018, the band released the super expanded version of Appetite for Destruction for its 31st anniversary. There was a single, a re-recorded, remixed version of Shadow of Your Love on red vinyl, backed with an acoustic version of Move to the City, and this version of Appetite for Destruction, which was a 4 CD and Blu-ray set. If you're only going to get one version of Appetite for Destruction, this is most definitely the beastie to get, because it features the album remastered, although I can't tell the difference. It features a 96-page booklet with lots and lots of photos and memorabilia and stuff like that. It's got a Blu-ray with a surround sound mix of the album on, and it's got 2 CDs of demo tracks recorded at the Sound City Studios in 1986. And as I said, the obscenely expensive £1,000 locked and loaded edition comes with an extra cassette. It comes with these on CD and LP and 12 7-inch singles on yellow vinyl and a whole bunch of extra crap that you don't need for an absurd amount of money. This features also inside here some memorabilia, which I'm going to very quickly show you. If you're going to get a version of Appetite for Destruction, unless you've literally got more money than sense, buy this instead. It features a replica ticket and I don't know, another thing and another thing here, another replica ticket and another replica ticket, and some fake tattoos that you'd be an idiot to ever use, and a reprinted flyer, and a whole bunch of lithographs, and some, I don't know, a poster or something, God knows what else. The Appetite for Destruction remaster, reissue, deluxe edition box sets were an enormous fudge of an insulting price tag with not enough material in it, and the fact that there wasn't live material from the Ritz or from the Marquee, for example, to justify the £150 price tag this box set originally came at is just ridiculous. It really, really is, and it shows that sometimes some bands have more money than sense. What I would add to this also is that the original retail version of this cost £150. It's now about £49, which is the price it should have always been all along. It's incredible to think that this band have somehow know the price of everything and the value of nothing, and have forgotten that, you know, their super deluxe versions are grossly overpriced for what's in there. So buy them when they become cheap, and if they don't become cheap, don't buy them, because you don't need, for example, 2 live albums and a Blu-ray that much. Okay, I'm going to wrap up here. I'm starting to run out of time. Thank you for holding on throughout all of this. I've barely touched upon everything that's in there. Suffice to say, I love this album. It's really bloody good, and it was